Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai.
Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into a 6th grade topic, the distributive property. Now, if you're new to my channel, I'll be putting timecodes in for this video in the description box below, so use that to skip ahead to whatever part of the video you think is most interesting. As always, if you have any questions about what you see today or even your own homework, you can always visit my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. This video is going to have 2 parts, so leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and let's get started. So let's say we have the following thing that we have to find the answer for. It's 2, you have parentheses, and inside your parentheses you have 4 plus 2. Previously on this channel, we talked about how we use parentheses in math. And 2 of the ways that we specifically mentioned were for grouping. So this would be a grouping here. You're grouping your 4 plus 2. This is your grouping. And to denote multiplication. Notice this 2 on the outside, there's no sign in between the 2 and the parentheses. This signifies notation. 2 times all of this. If you were to put all of that together, you can easily solve this by first figuring out what's inside. So that would be a 6, right? 4 plus 2, 6. And then treating this like multiplication, you would get 12. However, there's another way of doing this that doesn't have us focusing on doing what's inside the parentheses first. Instead, you can do something like this. You can distribute this 2 that's being multiplied by this 4 plus 2 to each element of your group. So it'll look like this. 2 times 4 plus 2 times 2. There's a plus there because there's a plus here. So that plus because of this plus. This is the distributive property. This tells you that if you have this 2 here, multiplied by some grouping here, that's joined together by an addition or subtraction, then you can rewrite it like this. And now you can just focus on the individual pieces here. Once again, this is going to follow your order of operations, so do your multiplication before you do your addition. So this is going to be 8, that's going to be 4, and if you were to add that, you would then get 12 again. Notice we got 12 in both cases. You shouldn't get a different answer doing these 2 methods. This should give you the same exact answer, although they go about it different ways. That's the beautiful part of math. A lot of times you can get the same exact answer, the right answer, just using a different method. And one thing about the distributive property is that it doesn't really matter how many things are inside your grouping. We just had 2 elements in our grouping, but we can have more. So let's say we had 2 times 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. That's all in your grouping, right? Now, once again, you can simplify this by adding up all of this and then multiplying by 2. Or you could do a slightly longer way and multiply each one of these by 2. So that would be 2 times the 1, 2 times the 2, plus 2 times the 3. Remember, there are pluses here, so you make sure you put your proper pluses there. Plus 2 times the 4, plus 2 times the 5. In this case, you see another good reason why we start dropping that multiplication sign, because this can get rather confusing. If you were to rewrite this as 2, 1 plus 2, 2 plus 2, 3 plus 2, 4 plus 2, 5, that's probably a little bit easier to read than something like this. The benefit of having parentheses denoting multiplication. So I'm not going to solve this because it's pretty easy to do that, but I want to show you that distributive property, it doesn't have a limit on what's inside your parentheses. And if some of these were subtraction, that's perfectly fine. You would then find the corresponding 3 here, and you're going to actually subtract that. Corresponding 5 here, subtract that. So that becomes a minus here, that becomes a minus here, and the same exact stuff works. But what you can't do is change a plus or a minus to a multiplication, or I guess I could have kept that, or division. The distributive property does not work for multiplication and division inside your parentheses. It has to only be addition or subtraction. Now there is a way to distribute this, but you will have to introduce some more parentheses just to make sure that your work doesn't get confusing. Now you may be asking, why would I ever want to do the distributive property when it seems like it's much simpler to just simplify everything first and then do your multiplication? And a lot of cases that might be true. However, there are plenty where it's not. One such case is when you introduce variables into your expressions or equations. So let's say you have something like this. 4, you have 2x plus 5. You can't technically simplify what's inside your grouping. There's nothing else you can do here. So the only way to further simplify this is to distribute your 4. Distribute your 4. So now you're going to have 4 2x plus 4 times 5, and then you have your 8x plus 20. You can't technically simplify what's in your grouping, so you should use your distributive property to further simplify this. And did you know that your FOIL method is really just a shortcut for your distributive property? So let's say you have a plus b times c plus d. Your FOIL method tells you to do, remember FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. So first, your outer, your inner, and your last. It even has the same arrows that we use for distributive property. That should give you a hint that this is really just the distributive property. But if you were to FOIL this out, you would have a times c plus a d plus bc plus bd. This is your shortcut from your FOIL. But let's say you were doing it the long way and you were distributing everything. Well, this tells you to distribute a plus b times each of these elements. Remember, it goes to each element. And your parentheses tells you that this is a grouping. That's a unit, one thing. You don't break it up yet, right? So this is your grouping. So you would then do, so this is the answer that we're expecting to get. Let's make sure we do get it. This is going to be your C times A plus B plus your D times A plus B. You're distributing the A plus B times each element. Your C and D both get an A plus B. But now you can do your distributive property once again. So you're going to have a AC plus BC plus AD plus BD. Now if you were to compare them, you have your AC, your AD, your BC, your BD. Your FOIL method is just the distributive property, only shorter. So before we move on to the next part of our video, there's one important thing that we hadn't discussed, and I don't want you to miss this. So recently, as we've been going through these examples, you may have noticed that all of them were some number multiplied by your grouping. Let's say 6, 7 plus 2. And just as a side note, it doesn't really matter if the 6 is in front or at the back. You can have this. It can work either way. It's the same exact thing. But we had examples like this, and we used our distributive property on it. However, it also works for division. There's a slight caveat though. You would have, let's say, 6 plus 4 divided by 2. This tells us, our distributive property tells us to distribute the 6 by that plus this 4 times or divided by the same thing. Now, if you were to do it the short way, right, by focusing on what's in your parentheses first, you have 10 divided by 2, which gives you 5. Now that you've done it this way, you drop your parentheses, you've done distributive property, you focus on division before you do addition because that's order of operations. This is going to give you a 3, that's going to give you a 2, which ultimately gives you a 5. Notice it works the same exact way. But what's the caveat that I mentioned? Well, if you put the division beforehand, it doesn't really work the same way. So let's say you have 10 divided by 5 plus 2. This is not saying that 10 is going to be divided by 5, and 10 going to be divided by 2. It's not saying that. So now that we've covered how it works, let's move on to our next part of the video, in which I give you an example of a small conflict you can get when you're trying to use both the order of operations and your distributive property. So when using your distributive property, you want to be very careful that you do things in order. If you don't do things in order, you can potentially find yourself in a small yet unescapable conflict. And here's an example of it right here. This 6 times 3 plus 1. So before we jump into distributive property, you can easily find this answer by focusing on what's inside your parentheses and then multiplying by the 6. So that would be a 4. So it's going to be 6 times 4, which gives you 24. So we know that the expected answer is going to be 24. If you use your distributive property, you should get the same thing. So if we distribute this 6 times your 3 plus, because there's a plus there, 6 times your 1, you get 6 times 3. Once again, order of operations at this point in time, there's no parentheses. 6 times 3, 18, plus 6 times 1, 6, 24. Just what we expected. However, here's where things get tricky. Your potential conflict can happen if you get a little bit ahead of yourself and go and distribute things out of order. So 6. What's another way of writing 6, for example? 6 can be, let's say, 2 times 3. 6 is 2 times 3. We know 6 equals 2 times 3. So I'm just going to write this 6 like 2 times 3. Now we know that 6 times 3 plus 1 should give us 24. But when you have this and you're so eager to distribute, you might fall into a trap that you can't find a way out of. So you can do something like this. 2 times, you can distribute that 3. So that'll give you a 9. You still do your plus because your plus is there, times your 3. And you're used to dropping parentheses, so you wouldn't even think about keeping parentheses here. And then now you're going to do your order of operations because there's no parentheses, so that's going to be 18 plus 3, which gives you 21, which that's not the same answer. That's not 24 that we got in 2 different ways up here. Now, you can salvage this. If you were to keep that in parentheses, that'd be a 2 times 12, which should give you the same answer that you were expecting. But once again, it depends on you catching things and putting parentheses in the right way. So you're technically adding more parentheses, or at least keeping them around a little bit longer before you drop them. But that's the multiplication. That works because of how multiplication works. It's commutative. Division gives us a little bit more of an issue. Another way of writing 6 would be 12 divided by 2. Now, we know that 2 times 3 is the same as 3 times 2, but 12 divided by 2 is not the same thing as 2 divided by 12. So if you had the same issue happening, a set of parentheses is not going to save you. If you were to get ahead of yourself and do distributive property here, before you did that division, remember, it's supposed to be 6. We know 6 here gives us that 24 when we do all the math. This is just 6. But if you distribute early, you keep your division here. This is going to be 2 times 3, so it's going to be a 6 plus a 2 here. Now, you are dropping all your parentheses, so you're going to have your 2 plus 2, which is way different from your 24. I mean, even if you kept parentheses here, that's still going to be 12 divided by 8, which is definitely still not 24. It is not 24. So when you're doing the distributive property, it's important that you do the order of operations. Your 6 can be written in multiple ways, and these are not great ways of writing them. Technically, you should put some parentheses around them. However, if you do order of operations, understand that this right here, when you're distributing, you're really multiplying. This is a multiplication here. So if that multiplication comes first, do it first. that solves all of your problems. If this division comes before this multiplication, do it first. That solves all of your problems. So I hope you were able to follow along with today's video and help you now understand how to use your distributive property. However, if you have any questions about what we saw today or even your own homework, make sure to visit me on my Facebook page at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. If you hadn't done so already, hit that like. It surely helps the channel by letting YouTube know that you found a video helpful. And if you found a video helpful, so can someone else. So leave a like, hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share the video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney, and this has been another session of Tutor Me Senpai.